Это был один из самых громких терактов. Террористы захватили в заложники более 1500 человек, 129 были убиты.
This territory belongs to the Russian embassy in Prague. Recently, a famous Russian writer, Viktor Yerofeev, shared a story. It is well known that the parents were diplomats, and he himself lived in France for a long time. The ambassador of Russia was showing him around the embassy and its grounds, and he told him that since 1947, hundreds of enemies and traitors of the motherland had been buried in the embassy's garage. The deemed criminals were being captured and killed all around Europe per Stalin's orders. It is interesting how many secrets these walls conceal, and what sacrifices will be required for this unveiling semantic war that Russia has declared against the Western civilization. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, and with Gorbachev coming to power, the world sighed a breath of relief with a hope that Russia would be on the path of friendly and neighborly relations with the Western world, and at last cessation to the lengthy Cold War. With the events of 1989, in Czech Republic, everybody in Russia was watching in hope the bloodless revolution of Václav Havel, in awe of the Czech people who were supporting the intellectual elite. In Russia was watching in hope the bloodless revolution of Václav Havel, in awe of the Czech people who are supporting the intellectual elite.
The feeling generally was enormous euphoria, enormous, like nobody was actually, it was very hard to believe that something like is happening, you know, like except for a few people around Havel and around the people who were always trying to do something. Nobody, general public, didn't believe that this can happen. So the feeling was total disbelief, euphoria, and feeling, everybody was feeling that he's part of incredible historical event, like part of a history.
Yeah, we lived through the communist regime till we were 14. So we have vivid memories of propaganda, because we were subjected to a very intense propaganda since our early age. In the elementary school, I've seen Brezhnev funeral on TV in my school, and I still recall some accident of the coffin falling off the cannon or something happened there. So there was propaganda all the time. I mean, I was quite immune to it, because my parents were not afraid of telling us what's going on, what's the truth and what's not. So to be honest, well, when we played as a little kids, the foe for us were the Russians. Like when we had the wooden weapons and we were shooting, you know, the enemies. The enemies were always the Russians. To be honest, well, when we played as a little kids, the foe for us.
Позволите, доложим в субботу. У нас пока не полная информация.
Понятно, очередные клоуны.
Normální a soudní lidé chápou.
Normal, reasonable people are the ones who understood that Soviet Union was a victim of a criminal Bolshevik ideology, and this was the minority. When in Soviet Union the perestroika started, so here certain hope arose with plenty of people. Even though from a clear disappointment around 68, when idealist Dubček wanted to give communism a human face, which is technically impossible. Gorbachev was his follower and was an idealist like him. So the attempts to make a normal system out of this failed.
Well, it was an experience of 2 generations already. 3 generations of people knew that this is totally false, totally artificial. The propaganda was a tool for government and for Moscow. Basically, everything was orchestrated in Russia, or the Soviet Union. So we knew that it's all totally. It was Orwell. It was a totalitarian regime. So there was no illusions. No one believed it. Not even communists believed it. So it was totally artificial, bizarre situation.
I remember I lived at the outskirts of Prague, so many of my schoolmates, they had actually the parents who were okay with the regime, let us say. Some of them even more than that. But still, Soviet Union, it was something that you don't want to be. If you play the game and you play the countries, everybody wanted to be the USSR or the Western Germany or something, and nobody wanted to be Soviet Union. So in a way, it made me the opposite ways, because I felt sorry that nobody wants to be. So I felt kind of sorry for that. But I was the member of the Pioneer, which is the youth organization, the same as in Soviet Union, because everybody was, and there were only 2 or 3 people out of 35 in classroom who weren't, and we didn't actually know exactly why they weren't, because everybody was. So I just felt about it. It was the youth organization, and we went to the woods and we did, I don't know, we played some games and something like that. But at the same time, about age of 11 or 12, a girl on the street, like my neighbor, she said, you know, everybody's speaking about the Soviets, how good they were, how brave they were, they freed us, but nobody says that in August they would shoot the people. And I was just figuring out that there was the end of the World War II in May, and then in August the Soviets came and started shooting people. So I came to my parents and I asked about it. And they didn't talk to me about it. But at this moment, at my age of 11 or 12, they said, yeah, that's true, but it wasn't the year 45, it was year 68, and they actually revealed to me what was happening and what was that. So it was like turning point for me. I didn't step out of the Pioneer Club, but it was a turning point, and since that I remember like searching for the information for 68, and I learned about Jan Palach and started listening to the radio, which was actually at this time, so we are talking about mid-80s. It was normal for many families listen to Free Europe or Voice of America.
General public in all socialist countries, be it Romania, Hungary, Bulgaria, Poland, East Germany, Czech Republic, they were all they were victims of Russians' totalitarian total regime. It was Orwell descriptions of reality. So everything was totally ethically or morally, it was wrong. It was wrong on all aspects. But we knew that we had nothing against normal Russians, because they were like us. So we knew it's the system, it's a propaganda, it's the power behind the scenes, which had total control over everything. It wasn't just the economy; it was the thinking, literature, art. Everything was under control. So the feeling was that there is no. There were two worlds. One was normal people, which was the majority, and then there were the evil sides, and it was the state police, the government, the Russians' connections, secret police. That was, everybody knew that there are always people trying to find out what's wrong with your thinking, and so people couldn't do their jobs, they couldn't go to schools, they couldn't travel, so there was not enough goods in the shops, so everything was wrong, and everybody knew it.
Propaganda is not one-sided. It's a shame when people say, quite young generation of Czech people, remember the occupation story and so on and so on. And unfortunately, it affects their attitude and mentality even now. It's the same as the French remembering, I don't know, Napoleon, or we, the Russians, would remember. So in your opinion, we should not remember such things, to forget. I think that history leaves an imprint on us. We must make conclusions, but there are things that we should shut them out and grow up with them, on these historical facts. But not to take on the status of a victim, and not to cultivate this history in yourself. This is my opinion, and I am apolitical. I live in Russia, and in Russia it is not in our nature to speak about politics. And why? Well, you need to live in Russia to understand how it all works. So you're coming to Czech Republic, and in pretty much every family and every place, it's normal to talk about politics with practically people that you just met. In Russia, it's just not done. We have different mentality, culture, and we've never had it. And you need to respect that. You need to respect the way it's happening in the other country and in the Czech Republic. For instance, we Russians don't think about that everything is bad because somewhere in the past the Germans got in the way, or when other European countries got in the way of our development. We're just doing our thing. Imagine 1989, the euphoria, the freedom, the liberation from the stale Soviet regime. And now imagine those elated people glancing through a slightly ajar door, getting a peek at what would await them in 2018, 30 years later. What would they feel upon the announcement on television that Russia is surrounded by enemies, with NATO camps all around and their rockets and missiles aimed at the cities of Russia, with Russia capable to reciprocate and turn its enemy, the USA, into radioactive ash? I doubt that anyone would have believed that they're in their right mind.
We just thought there is something overdue because we saw, what was going on in Poland, the roundtable negotiations, which been going on for a year. There was the Berlin Wall, like the revolution was brewing all around, and nothing was in the Czech Republic. So, or Czechoslovakia. So we just waited, and as you probably know, there had been big demonstration for the last 2 years before the end of the communism, before the Velvet Revolution. There were a big demonstration on the Wenceslas Square. There was even a demonstration which was allowed by the communist regime on the 10th December 1988 when Mitterrand was visiting. So, people were just waiting for the communists to go and for the country to be free. The mood was changing rapidly. Mm-hmm. So what people thought would not be possible 2 years before the revolution, they felt it's imminent when we were 3 months before November '89. So it was big expectation.
Nobody believed that, but not even in Czech Republic, not even in Poland, not in Hungary, where you have suddenly there are people who are taking advantage of their positions, taking advantage of their political connections, economical connections, and there is a new oligarchy happening everywhere, and they are in the positions of power, and we didn't believe it. It's going to be like we are too naive, too optimistic, too idealistic, and basically everybody. So after Václav Havel ended his presidency, we could see already the signs of changes.
Demokracie se nedá zavést.
Democracy cannot be adopted by means of revolution, law, orders, ordinance, or any declaration. Democracy is a product of an evolutionary process of the society. As they say, every nation has a government that they deserve. I remember the euphoria of 91. We were invited for the first time as a representative of Russian immigrants abroad to the first Congress. The overturn of GKČP, we were told instead of buses, they're tanks. And we were told that no one is responsible for our safety and we should save ourselves to the best of our ability. I was at the White House and saw this amazing euphoria myself, and I was fascinated with the women going up against tanks. And these people had enough. After they won, it was a great accomplishment. And the people were stopping us in the street, and the delegates of the Congress, they were stopping us in the street and talking to us. Well, we stopped this animosity. We stopped being enemies. We got rid of communism, for sure. And now we want to come back to the family of civilized people. And what we're hearing from Radio Liberty, Deutsche Welle, BBC, they need to send us tutors that will help us to explain what democracy is. We don't have any experience with it. It was a great thrill, and we really believe that it will continue in this manner. However, the Western world is leaning towards other things. And it happened that these tutors, experts, came, but they were paid by big corporations, and their aim was not to build democracy in Russia that would be economically powerful, but to use the situation to their gain, to their advantage. As I have spoken to some of these tutors, they were looking for creative people, because communistic regime was oppressing any creativity. We found out that there are two groups of creative people. The best of the best, these graduates that were taken to secret services, and the others. The others found themselves in the criminal world. So these people started working with the Western experts. Since then, and hence, a term of democrație appeared, literally shit instead of democracy. This is how the term came to be. I am still holding a grudge because of these Western tutors. A whole generation was lost who stopped believing in democracy. They could have been an ally of the West. I heard from many people that your democratic flowers cannot blossom in our cold climate. Here we can only have an authoritarian regime.
When I visited Russia in mid-90s, I felt that, and I was young and I was quite excited about our society, which had many problems, and if you speak about consumerism and things like that, we have gone through that at this time as well. But still, when I was there, I felt like this doesn't work, this is strange, but they are on the way. I mean, it's going to happen. It's just too big, doesn't have such a points in history as we do in First Republic or something, but it's on the way.
Well, we were hoping that it's going to change even in in the Soviet Union, and there were already some signs of change situation, of course, with Gorbachev and then with Yeltsin, that everybody was hoping that Soviet Union, not as a Soviet Union, but separate republics, and Russia will survive economically, survive socially, but not as a communist-led, with the Communist Party as the head of the state. So everybody was believing that it's going to slowly change into a democratic society.
After coming to power in 2000, Vladimir Putin did not show any animosity towards the Western society. The growth of the NATO reach into the former Soviet countries did not disturb Putin, as he was open to a prospect of Russia joining NATO in the near future. However, in 2003, the Russian political direction changed dramatically. We do not know for sure the cause behind this, the Rose Revolution of Georgia, an unsuccessful war campaign in Iraq, or it was Putin's intention from the start. From the very beginning, only a handful could see and warn the nation of the dangers of granting power to a KGB protege.
As soon as he took the power, so the simple connection that he was the KGB guy, so that's enough.
И мы как мученики попадем в рай, а они просто сдохнут.
If in Russia, after more than 100 years of Bolshevism, comes to power a KGB director, it is strange to wait for a miracle all of a sudden, a democratic breakthrough. It is evident that there will be a rollback. It will not come immediately. There are other aims, like not to work with people, but with the natural resources, money and business. Now the money have run out and it boiled down to people, the sheep count. People are the new oil. Seems logical.
When Václav Havel first put attention of Western people, danger of Vladimir Putin.
But he had no illusions about Russia, so he knew it right from the start. He knew it all the way that this was like bad situation for everybody. So he had so much intuition and his experience with Russian that he had no illusions, for sure, right from the start. Well, of course, he was an intellectual, he was a playwright, he was in a way not philosopher in a classical sense, but he was a thinking guy who knew what was happening and he could formulate it very well. So, because he was a playwright, so language was his tool, and he was also quite skillful at organizing people, and he was able to express and formulate their views better than anyone. And also the way he looked, and the way he behaved, and the way he acted, it was a big difference, you know. And many Czechs didn't realize it for long that he is actually a strong guy. If someone survived morally, survived in prison for more than 5 years, and he had the option to, they would let him to go abroad, you know, that they wanted him to leave the country, and he refused it. So that's means that he was a very strong character. And today, maybe half of Czech population is critical of him.
Why?
Well, because they all feel, without realizing it, that they failed. There was not much resistance, you know, there wasn't much active approach or critiques of the government or of the system. So they feel like this guy, there had to be something wrong with him. If he was such a hero, they don't want to accept it. You know? I think that's partly a tragedy and part of the Czech character. You know, we don't like heroes. I think that's
Надоели уже со своим гавелом, как попугай.
tragedy and part of the Czech character. You know, we don't like heroes.
Rusko je především oběť. Stále je to oběť.
Russia is above all a victim, still a victim. Until this day, its structure can be depicted as pachanat. People with low morals came to power, and the fact that the Czech society can sometimes think, and how the Czechs see and react to Russia. This is a typical Czech attitude towards a Russian imperial mentality. They were always imperialists and they were always invading territories, and it's a great tragedy for me and my friends. So we're trying to explain it. People have to be distinguished based on their way of thinking, opinions and behavior. People with morals and ethics. There are plenty of these people. And every year I make a report for the government that the society here is divided. The main part, the majority, is a good law-abiding citizens of the Russian diaspora. People who support and share democratic values. And the minority sympathizes and supports Putin. Really a minority, but they have more visibility somehow. The good ones are always hiding in the background. And this is what creates a bad impression.
Было стойкое ощущение, что страна...
Посыл как вопрос порешали?
Так точно. 12 пакетов, как всегда. Все нормально.
Было стойкое ощущение, что страна...
I had the impression that the country started going towards a different direction in opposition of the rest of the world that is moving forward. Russia was going backwards into medieval, barbaric times. And I was uninterested in reliving my youth that was in the Soviet Union, where we're fighting. In the 90s, we tried to expel and exorcise the slaves. And when it became apparent that it's coming back, and somebody's willingly going back, it became unbearable to me.
I was traveling through Russia, in the late 90s, beginning of the second millennium. And I was a bit surprised by seeing people in St. Petersburg who spoke fluent English and who hold views which were so different from ours in respect of Yugoslavia or other stuff. I just didn't understand how someone quite intelligent could believe in the things he believed. But it was my very limited interaction with one intelligent guy. Because I met plenty of people who were telling me that we were liberated in 1968 and why we are now looking at West. But, these were not people I met in a cafe in Petersburg, but in some small village, so I was not that much surprised about it. But generally, I can't talk about Russian society because I don't have much information about it. I don't know whether people now actually really support Putin, and if they do, why, and whether they support everything what he said.
It happened gradually, it gradually developed that now it's obvious, everybody knows it now, but we 8 years ago, 10 years ago, and then there was the swap with Medvedev, Medvedev for one period of time, then Putin again, then Putin for a second time, so it was a total control, total manipulation, and nobody would believe it. I think the biggest problem was that West didn't, I think even West in general didn't realize how bad it was, that there was still some naivety.
I would like to know the answer. Why does it happen in such a cultural country where the people are very often so nice, so open, and how can it, and many of so intelligent actually? What's the reason? How it's possible that it's going like that? I don't know.
Well, people were asking these questions in 1933 in Germany.